It is, I guess, a bit of a surprise and a pleasure to actually announce and discuss something a lot more positive, and that is the WA government announcing that they will be ending or putting a stop to most native logging in 2024. On the phone now, we have Jess Beckerling from the West Australian Forest Alliance to discuss this news. Firstly, I'd just like to say a huge congratulations to yourself, Jess, and everyone else at WAFA for all the years of and decades, really, of work that you've put into this. So first up, huge congratulations to yourself.
Oh, thanks, Ray. I mean, far out. This is a win that belongs to so many thousands of people, and such heartfelt work, that's gone into it over decades.
Totally. Now, I guess before we sort of start to unpack it all, can you just give us a brief, summary of what exactly this means? The government has announced they're going to put $350 million into softwood plantations, and that, at least in the southwest, all native logging would end in 2024. What exactly does it mean for our forests?
It's a huge breakthrough. It's absolutely massive. I mean, the native forest logging industry has been having catastrophic impacts on climate and wildlife, biodiversity, water, cultural values ever since it started here in WA, and it's finally coming to an end. So we've got 2 and a bit years to go until it stops, and that's because we're still within the 10-year forest management plan until the end of December 2023, but then from January 2024, when the next 10-year plan starts, there's not going to be any further logging of native forests.
And is that only in the southwest or all throughout the state?
Well, it's a policy that applies to the whole state, but the tall forests that are being logged for timber are in the southwest.
Right. Now, I guess some of our listeners would be maybe a little bit suspicious because, those of us that are old enough would, of course, remember the Gallop government's victory in 2001 and the promise to end old growth logging. Of course, we know that wasn't really an end to old growth logging. And unfortunately, we live in a world in which, while, we really want to be positive about this, there are, of course, the possibilities and the chances that these are politicians being politicians. Are you confident that this really will mean an end to all native logging in the state?
Yeah, look, you're spot on. And the most seasoned campaigners, old friends and colleagues of mine from around the country, that was exactly the tone that they were taking when they were texting me first thing on Wednesday morning. I'm holding my breath here a little bit. Is this real? And it's a perfectly reasonable thing for people to be doing in the circumstances. We've got to bite this sort of stuff off in chunks, and this announcement doesn't mean that all of our southwest forests are now completely protected from all threats, of course, and there's always going to be work to do. There's always going to be advocacy around protecting the incredible intrinsic values of the southwest forest. What this does is deal with native forest logging for timber production. So what it means is that we're not going to be seeing the Karri and Jarrah forests and Wandoo forests being logged in order to supply largely low-value timber products and the timber industry more broadly. So we're still going to have to deal with the threat of Alcoa and South 32 and other mining interests, particularly in the Jarrah forest. We still have to deal with fire management, and we still have to deal with thinning. So those are the things that we're really going to have our eyes really focused on for the next 2 years to make sure that not only we're able to really minimise the damage that's done in these next 2 years, because that's going to be a major task, but also that the next 10-year plan really sets the details right so that the framework for how the forests are going to be managed is as good as we can possibly make it, because the damage that's been wrought on the southwest forests ever since European settlement here has been profound. And finally, we're in a situation where we have a government saying the forests are worth more for climate and biodiversity, and we're all facing in the same direction. But now the task is to get the details right and actually make sure that 10-year plan protects the forest's values.
We're speaking to Jess Beckerling from the West Australian Forest Alliance about the recent announcement by the McGowan government to end native logging in the state. Jess, you mentioned there that there are 2 years to go, and I guess many of our listeners would be aware of the situation that occurred in Tasmania when they ended some old growth logging there. There was a real, kind of snatch and grab by the forestry industry in Tasmania in the lead up to the sort of the moratorium on logging there. Do you foresee that kind of thing happening in the next couple of years? Are you concerned and worried that some players in the industry will think, well, let's just get in there and destroy as much as we can, get as much timber out as we can before this comes into effect?
Yeah, I think it's a complex area, and there's a lot of different things that could be said about that. I think initially what the policy setting is going to be is important. So we know that the government's not going to increase allocations. They're not going to allow for any extra logging to occur in the next 2 years. But at this stage, they're also not talking about proactively buying out any of the companies so that the logging can decline. They're talking about just letting it run its course for the next 2 and a bit years and then calling it to an end. So what we can anticipate, at least from a kind of a broad perspective, is that the same sorts of volumes will be coming out per year, which is about 6,500 hectares being logged per year. So it's still a huge area. But we can also anticipate that without really close monitoring, there may well be some particularly heavy-handed logging going on, in the next couple of years in those forests. So we want to make sure that a couple of things happen. One is that the most precious areas for threatened species, Aboriginal cultural values, water values, those sorts of things are taken off logging plans immediately. And then also that there's really close scrutiny applied to those individual logging operations to keep the contractors as close as possible to the industry's own guidelines, which have always been completely inadequate. But at least we need to be making sure that as little damage is done as possible in each of those individual forests.
Jess, one of the arguments that's made against winding up the sort of forestry industries and also other destructive and unsustainable industries is the impact on livelihoods, the impact on the communities in which these industries exist. The government has announced that there will be a huge investment into softwood plantation timber. Do you think that there is going to be a just transition, as people refer to it, for the families and the workers that have been working in forest industries, and how important is that in terms of making sure that this is a sustainable transition and actually does go through?
Yeah, it's critically important, and WAFE has been taking this really seriously for a long time, and we put together the Forest for Life plan in 2016. And I think the government, they're doing a really solid job of saying they've got $350 million, which is the biggest investment that's ever gone into the softwood estate. It's going to grow a lot of timber on previously cleared land. There's not going to be any more land clearing for those trees to be planted, and it's going to create a lot of jobs. And then there's another $50 million that they've put into helping those individual workers to transition. We're talking about around 400 people who are still employed in native forest logging. So it's really important that they're taken care of and that job is done well. And then, we also know that there's a whole lot of other people in the southwest in tourism and accommodation, agriculture, horticulture, wine growing, honey production, people who have been calling out for the forest to be protected for a really long time because they need them protected for their livelihood. So I think it's really important that we kind of draw the lens back and look at the whole socioeconomic set of circumstances in the southwest. We need to take care of those timber workers, and we need to transition them over to sustainable timber production and other sustainable jobs. But we also need to think more broadly about all of the other people in the southwest, and the vast majority of them are benefiting from this decision.
Jess, Brent Jones here. Obviously, the huge success of influencing government with your campaign through West Australian Forest Alliance. What is next when it comes to Alcoa? Like that's that they've got big contracts with the government and are able to clear this. How do we battle that beast?
It's so important. So there's a couple of ways, and the most important one is coming up soon. The EPA are going to be scrutinising an expansion proposal that Alcoa have put up for a further 8,500 hectares of jarrah forest that they want to clear for bauxite mining between 2025 and 2035. And this is the first time in my lifetime that there has been such scrutiny applied to bauxite mining. So starting around about the middle of December, there's going to be a public environmental review, which is the highest level of EPA review, opened to public consultation, and we're going to have a couple of months for the public to be able to really make a huge amount of noise around how important it is that those forests are protected. And also the EPA have now sort of shifted the way that they assess projects like this. They're also able to look at the cumulative impacts of different projects and different time frames of what's been going on in the Jarrah forest altogether. So instead of just looking at the next 8,500 hectares, they can look at what's happened in the Jarrah forest over the years. So that's going to be really important. It's going to be a different framing and a different way for us to be able to emphasise what the impact has been and how precious the remaining bits of the Jarrah forest are. So it's really important that people get behind that, and we'll be making it really simple and clear for people, letting them know, when it's starting and what the opportunities are. So we'd encourage people to follow us on Facebook, WA Forest Alliance, and also the Jarrahdale Forest Mob and the Dwelling Up Forest Mob, who are doing incredible work to keep Alcoa to account.
Jess, just mentioning there the public comment and public review, this latest announcement in terms of protecting our native forests came after the survey that was put out by the state government. That is quite amazing, and I think really important to mention that some 17,000 people took that survey. It wasn't a particularly easy survey to take, and 17,000 people did that. What really demonstrates the will in the community to save our native forests. But also, I think it's important to mention that this isn't necessarily a benevolent action from our state government. This has come about from decades and decades of campaigning. And I guess just to finish off, what more can people do? Where to now for the campaign? Of course, you mentioned there Alcoa and the importance of people getting involved in the campaign to stop that destruction. But what else can people do who are concerned about our native forests and our forests here in Western Australia?
Yeah, Alcoa is a massive one, and the other two are fire. Fire management is critically important. Fire's been a part of this landscape for a very long time, and we've changed the way that it's applied dramatically in the last couple of hundred years. We need to fix that. There needs to be an independent review. We need much better science behind the way that we're managing forests in terms of fire, not just forests, but all of the ecosystems down here. And then also thinning is going to be a major one. So the state government have said that they are still planning to have these management activities that are designed around forest health. So the fine print in that of how they actually manage the areas that are heavily degraded, and that's going to be thinning operations. The detail around what that looks like is going to be absolutely critical. So there's three things. There's clearing, there's thinning, and there's fire. And that we're going to have a lot of opportunity to deal with those in the next couple of years and beyond. But look, a lot of us have been doing this for a really long time, and there's even been people who I've campaigned with who've passed away before we've gotten to this point. This is the kind of work that takes people working from their heart, focused on the needs of the forests and never giving up. And we've got 2 years of hard work ahead of us, and beyond that there's going to be other ways that we can defend forests. It's a community movement, and we've got to stick with it.
We've been speaking to Jess Beckerling from the West Australian Forest Alliance. And again, Jess, to yourself and all those involved in WAFER and all those out there, if you're listening or not, that have spent their time dedicated to saving and defending our native forests, massive love and respect to all of you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Jess.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And this is the Indie Media Show on RTRfm.